Hello and welcome to the Fire in the Belly show. Today we'll have myself, Mighty Pete, and we're joined by Avital Miller. Good morning to you. Yes, it is good morning.
It is good morning.
Welcome to the show. It's fantastic to have you on.
Thank you so much for having me on here. I am super excited to be on your show and so excited for your topic.
Wow, thank you. Well, what does Fire in the Belly mean to you before we really sort of get started?
Fire in the belly. Okay, you get to hear like sort of the yogi and the healing practitioner like viewpoint of this, because the third chakra is where the belly is, and chakras are energy centers, and it's supposed to represent willpower, and the element that it represents is fire. So how appropriate that you mentioned fire in the belly, which happens to be how yogis describe the third chakra. And that's related to willpower and what gives us the drive to take action. It's fire. It's igniting that fire. Fire is connected with passion, with making magic happen in our lives. And it can be applied to many things and in many directions. The other thing about fire, because I've also studied Ayurveda, which I call an ancient Indian medical science, which is both curative and preventative. But it talks about your natural balance in your body between earth, air, water, fire, ether. And for me, the one that is the highest is fire.
Wow. That's possibly the best answer I've ever had. just to put it out. Most people go, yeah, it's a bit of passion. It's like, so that's awesome. That's awesome. So this really does bring fire in your belly. You understand that it's part, as you say, it's the yoga, it's part of the chakras. So it means something to you, right? So it's, do you have it? Do you work with it? Is that one of your things, really?
Yes. Well, and I'm very blessed to have it naturally. There's another program called Human Design. So I've studied a lot of these things that help try to, you could say, put us in boxes in a way, but help understand the humans in more quantitative terms. And so in human design, they kind of define there's two centers of willpower. And one of them is the belly, and one of them is the heart. And when they're filled in, then it's like it's defined, like it's clear. You could still have fire and willpower, but it usually comes more when you're around people who have high willpower, when it's not filled in. And then you all of a sudden feel like you have this extra, zest or willpower or drive. So that's definitely something, but there's something interesting just about me as well, because growing up, there was one evening when I was a teenager and my mother said, "Did you do your homework?" And then she laughed because she said, "I don't need to ask you that." There was something in me that just had a natural drive to do the best at whatever I was doing, whatever was laid in front of me, like to do it most extreme. And I think this comes off easily to my family and my stepmother, who didn't see me growing up, but saw me in my later years. I hit my head this winter and had a concussion. And I don't know if you want to know the story of how I did that. But basically my stepmom
Go for it. We're
well.
committed now. Go for it.
I know. My stepmom says, "Well, whatever you do well." Hitting my head, getting a concussion. I did it well. It sounds horrible, but literally, so I've been taking ballet classes. I'm a dancer, and I've been taking ballet classes on Zoom since the pandemic started. I haven't gone back to the studios yet. And I set up my new home that I bought this year to make it easier to do ballet at home. And instead of looking at a tiny little computer screen from a distance, and then the body that I'm trying to follow is, the size of your finger, I bought a big screen TV that I can connect Zoom over to. But my place is, more long and narrow. So I turned the TV, and I got the special arms to turn the TV. And I'm really just setting up for ballet. I'm not even dancing yet. And I decided that I needed to put my recycling by the front door. I really didn't need to do that to set up for ballet. I needed to do it before ballet started so I could feel more organized. And the door is fairly close actually to the TV when it's turned. So I put the box down and the TV is behind me. So I get up and I turn at Avital speed, which is fast quite often, and whack the corner of the TV. I pretty much fell and had to go to the hospital and had to have my forehead glued together.
Nice. Nice. It's a dangerous career then, this ballet dancing, right?
I know. Very dangerous to dance from home.
Oh, wow. That's class. There's all the sort of mischief and the things you get up to just when you're, trying to do things from home and get caught up, So, oh dear.
Yeah.
You've been fun, described as an energizer bunny, and I love this. There's a bit of a narrative and a bit of background to you. So we talk about having boundless energy, beautiful dynamic style, and getting really sort of audience hearts and getting them their bodies up and moving. I mean, give us a bit of background to that. So I mean, this is who you are. Is that a fair statement?
Well, this is how people describe me, and I feel like it's true. I mean, most of the time I have a lot of energy. I do a lot. I have more energy than the average person. I have stayed in a lot of people's homes, especially when I went on book tour. And that's when I really saw the comparison there. There was only one person who had more energy than me. She's amazing. Some of energy is natural. So naturally, when I was born, I was this way. And do you remember nap time from preschool?
Mm-hmm.
But mostly you shouldn't remember nap time because you should have been napping. I remember it very clearly because I remember laying in those cots, patiently waiting for nap time to be over. I was a kid every night, went into mom's room. Mom, I can't sleep. And I was up before everyone watching the little cartoons on TV, patiently waiting for everyone else to get up. I had this belief. I think I was offered coffee at a young age, and the taste of it was not appealing to me as a kid. And it's still too strong for me today as an adult, like the actual taste of it. But I knew people also drank it for energy. I had this sense that we have a natural ability to have all the energy that we need. And if we don't have it, it means we need to change something in our life. That was from a young age, my belief. So I wouldn't touch the coffee. And I just so many times in my younger years had people, when I started telling them all the things that I did, they'd look at me, and because I look younger than I am. So it's happened so much. It hasn't happened lately. So maybe I'm starting to look older, but when I was younger.
I'm not going to ask your age. That's a dangerous thing to go down.
But especially when I was younger and I'd say all these things that I was accomplishing, people look at me, they're like, can I ask you something personal? Every time I was like, I know you want to ask my age, because they're like, how do you look this young and have accomplished this much? So there I am. I have this identity of Energizer Bunny. I graduated from college with an engineering degree and a dance major. I got hired at Microsoft as a program manager straight out of college. And it was a great company, but I was like, this isn't my passion, right? It doesn't really produce the fire in my belly. So I quit that. I traveled the world. I became a yoga and fitness instructor, but I quickly became a teacher trainer, fitness director, teaching 25 to 30 classes all over town. And that's really, really what people are calling me, the Energizer Bunny. So this is an identity that I had. I went on a family vacation. It was actually for my sister's wedding in Israel. I was napping on the couch most of the time. I was so thankful my family did not make fun of me, because I felt like my identity was shattered. And of course, I was confused. For what reason is this happening? But you can imagine that, maybe a time in your life where you felt embarrassed about something you couldn't control. That's a bit of what was happening. Besides wondering, am I going to be able to do my job? Right? If you start to lose your voice, you mentioned be heard to be rich. Um, would you start to wonder, well, am I going to keep doing this podcast and have this wealth come in from the same way if I lose my voice, my speaking voice? This is what's going through my head. I went home and, my knee had also given out during the trip, and I'm supposed to teach all these aerobics classes. And so it's wondering, how am I going to do this? And my hair was falling out. My muscles were turning to fat. I had a fever for a couple months. I was teaching a spinning class, the indoor bicycles, and my face turned flush white. My students told me to go to the emergency room. And when I was there, and I didn't seek any medical help yet. So that was the first time I did. And they did all these tests on me, and they just sent me home. They said, we can't figure out what's wrong with you. That my thyroid numbers were just slightly off, but they said, you're too young for that to be an issue. But I still had a fever for 2 months. So I read up and went back in, and I said, I think you should test my antibodies. And the antibodies were through the roof. And what that means is then the doctors are going to define that you have something called Hashimoto's and hypothyroidism. They put me on a high dosage of medicine and just sent me out the door saying that's it for life. I'm thinking, okay, I believe them. So this is kind of like an arranged marriage. So how am I going to do it in the best way possible and work with this, live with this? So I start reading online, reading books, because now I have a specific condition that I can read about. And I'm studying with all these different types of medical practitioners. This was when I went to India and studied one-on-one with the Ayurvedic doctor. And all of these things that I'm doing are really leveling me out. I'm feeling more balanced, which is the first miracle when you're on a hormone medicine. The next thing that happens is I start meditating. And I don't know if you've meditated, but typically when people meditate, they feel better, right? I felt worse. So I have to wonder, right, what could be making me feel worse? I'm meditating. I'm doing the things that make you feel better. And what do? Of course, I go to the doctor. The doctor does the tests on me and she says, well, you're overdosed on your medicine. You need to lower it. And then my meditation practice got deeper, it got more serious, it got longer. I learned more techniques. So again, not feeling well. Back to the doctor. You're overdosed on your medicine. This was a miracle to me. They didn't tell me that it was possible to lower my dosage of medicine. When that happens for me, I start to wonder if that could happen for me. What else could happen for other people? And that's actually where I started interviewing all of these different health and healing practitioners. And that's where my book, Healing Happens, Stories of Healing Against All Odds, got birthed. Because this was my story of healing from an autoimmune disorder, but other people had stories where they were told they were going to die in a few months or a few hours. I'm meeting them years later, fully healthy. So I had to talk to all these different practitioners, get their stories, the stories of their clients. What is it that they're doing? What is it that gives us more choice of when our energy is high and when our energy is low? How do I get the Energizer Bunny back, right? That's the exploration I went on. That's what created this whole concept and the energy programs that I've developed around feeling more energetic.
I mean, it's phenomenal, and what a realization, I suppose. How did it feel to come through that, and to actually retrospectively look back and see it? I mean, because as you say, it was sort of it was a thing for life, and then suddenly it's not. I mean, does that make you doubt everything?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes. And in fact, in the process of studying about health, I realized we were taught to drink milk and drink meat for protein. And it was like, there's a lot of protein in greens. Still today, people don't think about that much. That the people who did the studies on some food research were the people who would profit off of the results that they created. That all this trust I had in what I'm putting into my body, the Kraft macaroni and cheese, I loved that. That is a processed food. It's basically fake. And to learn that, or what we're spraying in our homes, what we're spraying in the air, what we're spraying the farms, that all of these things could actually be causing the health challenges. What we put in our drinking water, in our tap water, in our bottled water could have helped contribute to the health issues. I always trusted, the government, politics, the president, just this undying loyalty. And you start learning more about what's happening behind the scenes there. Yes, makes you question a lot of things, but it also makes you relate that in my book, these are people overcoming seemingly insurmountable challenges. We could apply these success strategies to other areas of life. And therefore, what else could happen beyond what we expect? And that's why I love speaking, because it's these stories that can contribute to all areas of life and be relatable for everyone. Although, be honest, most people will either have a chronic condition or know somebody who has a chronic condition or a serious health issue. So even just the health part will at some point be relatable to everyone.
is this a sliding scale? Because I mean, our bodies are made up of all sorts,
Energy.
Yeah, well, energy to begin with, but I mean, we have bacteria, we have viruses, probably in, some that don't register, some do, some don't, is it all a sliding scale then of actually our level of health in terms of whether it actually, debilitates us, or whether it actually slows us down, or whether it has no effect, or maybe it's underlying, right? So, you know, or do you think it is possible to have a sort of a full cleansing?
Perspective. I love that you've asked this. Here's why I bring, what is it? The Avital engineer meets woo-woo, and I've created Avital science. And what Avital science is, so when my hair was falling out, my muscles were turning to fat, I'm gaining weight, and I'm not having energy. What's actually happening, it's not the body getting worse, it was the body making choices. And the body is making a choice that there's something really strong, really horrible in the body going on. And there's a few things that I could share with you also on this, because the first thing is perspective of what was wrong. And perspective of what the side effects or the symptoms that I was having mean. But when the body is really busy working on something really wrong, then it's like the body assumes that it has a limited supply of energy. We actually have an unlimited supply of energy, but it's how do we apply more energy to the system? But the body has a certain number of blood cells, at any moment, right? And so it's still making choices in each moment. And so it decides, I'm going to work on fighting this thing. And I'll tell you what this thing is in a moment, right? So right now we're going to call it the autoimmune disorder. I'm going to work on fighting this autoimmune disorder. And so I'm going to take, she doesn't really need that much hair right now. And she also lives in Santa Barbara. It's a warm environment. So she really doesn't need the warmth, or she can just put a hat on. She doesn't really need this much energy. She doesn't really need to be this skinny right now. So I'm going to use the energy that I would normally use to digest or, process fat to help heal this autoimmune disorder. So that's just one thing for people to understand, is that sometimes they feel like they're getting worse, but your body's actually doing what it's supposed to be doing. It's just not working on what it normally works on, so it can completely consume itself for this bigger thing. People who are having chemo, that is a easier way to understand that, because there's a lot of side effects to chemo that are really, really obvious. But at the same time, if the chemo is working, right, the body is also healing. So that's one thing. Perspective. What I've also been taught is there's potentially another perspective around autoimmune disorders. And specifically mine, the description is that the body is attacking the thyroid gland. From a woo-woo perspective, I don't actually believe that the body attacks itself. I believe that the body wants to take care of itself. The body doesn't get confused, and the body knows what to do, but it's making these choices. And what I've heard from various medical practitioners is that the body's not attacking itself. It's attacking a virus in the thyroid gland. So two of the viruses that I've heard about potentially connected with this one are Epstein-Barr virus and Lyme disease. And Epstein-Barr virus, I think it's not, deadly, but it affects so many different functions in your body. Lyme disease is more serious as well. And that can lead to a lot of other things, which a lot of practitioners don't always know can be traced back to Lyme. So that just, perspective of what exactly is the issue. From another spiritual perspective, and one of the things that really hit me when I started reading about the Hashimoto's and the hypothyroidism is, they would say that, so it's in the throat. And I talked about chakras, energy centers earlier, right? And the throat is, what do? We talk, we communicate. And so, often people who have those thyroid issues, they also have issues with their communication. And at first I'm thinking, well, my goodness, I teach 25 to 30 classes a week. I'm a fitness director of 100 staff people, training people, training instructors. I communicate a lot. It was, it's in my personal relationships. It's in my romantic relationships. I am not communicating the depth of how I feel when something doesn't feel good. And at that point, it's a readiness, you could say, in my soul, in my mind, in my spirit, and my emotions to start to address that. And my body has a reaction in the process of that as well. And there's a belief that when we change rapidly, mentally, emotionally, or spiritually, that the body has to catch up. So now remember, everything is made of energy. There's vibrational frequency waves. Okay. Sometimes it's hard to imagine that thought might have a vibrational frequency wave, but it's kind of like experiments where if you watch What the Bleep Do We Know, but you write the word, like bad, and you put it on water, and then a glass of water, and you write the word good, and you put it on a glass of water, or you change the type of music being played for plants. And the cell structures look very different. So with the word bad, it's this really strange formation, and there's no pattern to it. And with the word good, when you look at the cells, there's a beautiful snowflake pattern that's all symmetrical. So that sometimes starts to help understand that everything has the vibrational frequency wave, and what you want in your own body is for all of those types of vibrational frequency waves for each different aspect of yourself, right? What we see as physical, and what we feel in our emotions, and what we think in our head, and what we intuit, that all of those vibrational frequency waves match. But when we grow as inside, right, in the non-physical aspects, our physical side needs to grow with it, the energetic vibrational frequency waves. And sometimes the body might also pose these symptoms in order to give us an excuse to rest so that the body can catch up. And when you look at people like Louise Hay, and she's actually, from her work, has figured out that commonly with all of these different types of disease symptoms, that people often have a certain thought pattern associated with it. And that's their next thing to overcome. So there's still been a lot of research and work out there that's connecting the emotional side. I just saw a documentary last week on this gentleman who's connected having trauma to having health issues, and he helps people heal their trauma, and then their health issues stop progressing. So perspective, I actually believe that health issues often come when we are going through a spiritual growth. And that's why I actually have one of my podcast episodes is disease is a sign of spiritual progress. But I also I've slowly been making them for all the major diseases or issues out there. Like I have one coming out on alcoholism. So I've created affirmations, and I'm using also Louise Hay as an influence for that. But just short meditations that people can do to help work on the emotional side that may be connected to the physical challenge that they're experiencing.
Are you clear why? I mean, and it's interesting because, so what I'm picking up is that these things are happening for you. But I suppose in terms of your process, I mean, are you clear where they were initially triggered? Is that important? And so that's my point, and quite often it is, people sometimes will look to heal the actual symptom and not necessarily the cause. So it can be slightly misaligned, but I'm just curious to know what your take is on that.
Yeah, no, I really feel like it's very helpful to investigate for what reason is the symptom there. The medication that I was given, and I'm still on a little bit of medication, like, just to put this out there in being honest, but nowhere near what I started with. So I'm continuing to progress and grow, but I'm also still working on, you could say, like the emotional issues connected with that. When we talk about fire in the belly, you have to realize like how much more fire you get in the belly when you have these breakthroughs, as you continue to grow as a person. But to remind me where we were going with this.
You were talking about curing, well, really treating symptoms as opposed to, causes.
Yeah. And so because I've given this medicine, and I'm like, they're just giving me thyroid hormone. But the antibodies are still really high. So how do we actually lower the antibodies? For what reason did I have thyroid issues? And the doctor who actually started tapering me off the medicine, she was more of a naturopath. So she was looking at also the different types of reasons, because there's various reasons as to why. And then she does different treatment protocols depending on the type of reason, or just tries the gamut. Because it's hard to really, really know for sure. A lot of perspectives. I feel like, maybe there's a way to do more research to understand better for what reason something began. But if you're just doing something, it may be functional, right? It just makes you feel better. But you don't actually heal. And then you're stuck on the medicine. And this has been my thing. And this is also why I work a lot with just giving people natural things to do. I still use, like, I decided, since we're doing a long interview, there's this device called Healy, which basically pops vibrational frequency waves into you. And I put stamina on, right? Because we're doing a long interview. I'm like, I'll give myself a boost and give myself some help. But if I'm stuck on a deserted island, or let's just talk about this in real terms, I'm stuck at home in lockdown, right? Because the world is shut down. And what if manufacturing did stop for medicine during that time? I mean, the world did their best to keep that piece going, but everything was still delayed. So what if we couldn't have access to that, and our life is dependent on this thing? So it's important to also look at what is the cause and how do I actually heal, so that I can live more independently of a need on any outside thing.
Does this need to be a transition journey? Because, I mean, just thinking, I mean, we talked about proteins earlier there, and diet. So it's all well and good saying today I understand what's wrong, but there's a transition, there's a cleansing process that needs to go through to undo, to rebalance, to do whatever. So, because I'm curious of this sort of this weaning process. Weaning is maybe not the right word, but this readjustment process you're going through for this, the drugs level in your system. And I'm curious about that, as to what's your thoughts? Is, does it take time?
It takes time. I believe there's overnight potential. And a couple of stories in my book, they were in awareness that created an overnight transition, but it still took their body's time to heal. But the first readjustment, and that's why I said it was a mindset thing that shifted in these people quite often. And sometimes it came from what people call a near-death experience, where you sort of feel like you're out of the body and you're noticing things. And I've never directly, had one of those. I think I've been gifted a lot of the wisdom, without that. But the first thing is just choosing your values, because your value may be like, I'm more focused on sort of just staying present with my goals, with doing things in the world, with my work, whatever it might be. And I just want to pop a pill and keep going. I want a quick fix. Right. And so that can be some people's values. And, I think for me, when I needed to be an energetic, healthy, aerobics instructor, and I'm like, well, I can't do my career. So in a way, I was forced to. I mean, I would have suffered so much pain if I didn't learn how to take care of my body, mind, and spirit differently, during that time. So for some people, it's just having enough pain that makes you want to do that. It's the realization of the potential pain. I was still very gung-ho on fitness and health before any problems happened. Then I just realized there was a lot more I had to learn about it. So it drove me to understand the full health of our system in more detail. So that's the first transition, is aligning with a value that makes you say, let me take some time to step aside from what I'm normally doing and make this system stronger. In a way, I've done it again this year. It has zero pretty much like slowed me down from achieving what I want. But I'm on a treatment that's a year-long treatment. And, I've sort of made that choice knowing there may be a lot of ups and downs. There may be some fatigue in the process. Like I've had headaches and nausea. in the process of this. But this is a deeper way basically to help get those viruses out of my body, like fully. And so I am using a medicine right now to help out as well. And it's just, I'm like, I'm okay, because when I think about this long term, it's just those little subtle moments where I more easily get sick than other people, right? Like where I had COVID more serious than some other people, where I'm less likely to have those issues if I just spend the time right now thinking long term. So that's another value transition. And it was really easy for me to, because I had that value and that fire in my belly, right? To go for the goals in that way. It was really easy for me to transition my life, to give up foods that I love, and there's lots of ways to do this to make that diet transition easier, because there's lots of other things you can learn to love in the new side. And for me, it's exciting to do new things as well. And go through that process. And it's exciting to take care of myself. And it's better for the body to go to bed earlier. By even like wind down at 9, go to bed at 10 p.m. And I'm a dancer. I'm a social dancer. Dances start at 10 p.m. on average, but when you're at festivals, they start at midnight or 1 a.m. And so I've just created my own dance events that start earlier instead of bothering to stay up all night. Or every now and then I'll do it and I'll make sure that I can sleep in the next morning. But we just adapt life accordingly to what our needs are. But that the value is my health. And that's the driver. I mean, there's just so many times people are like, you're leaving already, from these dance things. I'm like, yeah, like it takes me a little bit of time to wind down also with all this energy. So I'm going to go get like a good night's sleep and good health. And then be able to come back with power tomorrow. I see them all the next day, they're all dragging their feet and I'm like, so it takes time. It takes time for the body to change. In my Embody Vibrant Health course, I actually go through all of these steps of the process. And one of the things that I mention is that doing one thing impacts another. So when I actually trained at the yoga school, they created a radiant health pyramid, where they put in the physical, energetic, mental, emotional, and spiritual layers all in one pyramid. So I think it's helpful because somebody might have a hard time changing their diet, but it's easy for them to sit and meditate, let's say. So that's the spirit side, and the diet is the physical side. When you meditate, you become a calmer person, typically. You're also going to be more energetic, but it's a more focused energy versus a scattered energy, which actually can wear you out. So more focused energy, you feel calmer, you feel more fulfilled inside. Now, there's emotional reasons why people are eating certain foods. And when your emotions are more satisfied, then you naturally have less cravings for certain foods. And then it's easier to change your diet because you focused on the meditation, right? On the thing that was easy for you. Now, a person with a very active mind, that also has a lot of drive, might find it easy to change their diet, but not easy to sit and meditate and to sit still and be quiet. But here's the thing. I love this. When I first started changing my diet, and he was an MD and an acupuncturist. And I used to sit with him for hours. He would just teach me. So it was beyond just going to him, for what's going on in my body, but he would help me understand more details of how all of this works. And I'd say so I changed my diet, and then I'd say to him, because we talk about my personal life too, and I'd say, I didn't get angry in the situation like I normally do. And he'd say, oh, your liver's working better. And I'm like, and I handled the situation more calmly than I normally do. He goes, oh, your kidney's working better. because there's also different emotions tied to the different organs in our body. And when we change our diet and when our internal body is functioning better, it naturally changes our emotions. And then what happens when we get calmer inside because our emotions shift? It's easier to sit and meditate. So there's the flip-flop is just having that awareness when you're making that adjustment is to do what's right for you. There are 20 million ideas out there of what you can do for your health, like probably, literally. And if you do them all, you're probably going to drive yourself crazy. I tried. I realized that there were some things I did not enjoy on that list. And there were some things that I intuitively knew would help me or wouldn't help me. And when I realized I didn't need to do everything, I focused on the ones I enjoyed and the ones I intuitively felt would be helpful. And then life became a lot more relaxed. Those are some tips to help with the process.
That's fabulous. That data, that process, I mean, depending, I suppose, I'm curious about your take on the body's consciousness. I mean, is it just pure conscious choices, or is it subconscious punishment, or punishment's maybe a little bit of a hard word, but subconscious intentions that just have poor outcomes?
Let me see. So first I want to define subconscious, conscious, and super conscious. So we understand like what exactly is subconscious. But also I want to say that I don't feel like disease happens because we've done anything wrong. Again, I feel like it's happening because we're ready for a growth. Because there are plenty of people out there who are doing the same things we're doing, or feeling the same things we're doing, or eating the same foods, and they don't get the health issues that we do. So it could actually be a gift and not, this divine retribution for anything that we've done wrong. Because also, in terms of the healing process, and I actually learned to, it's when they talk about autoimmune disorders and they say your body is attacking itself, I'd rather not use those words. So the words that we say, the thoughts that we think, how we feel about ourselves will also impact our ability to heal. And if we're going to feel bad about ourselves because of this thing happening, like we've done something wrong, we're going to feel worse. It's not going to help us heal. And there's already so much out there that ties emotions with the health of our body. Stress is the biggest thing that causes disease. What causes stress? Our emotions, right? Traumas. That's why that gentleman did the documentary on traumas causing disease. So what's subconscious? And this is in yogi terms, it's when you look down. It's a habit that is created, good and bad habits. You may notice, those who are driving to work, that there's some days you get to work and you're like, God, I don't even remember the drive. Because it's on autopilot. There's a habit of knowing how to watch what's on the street, knowing where to turn, knowing where to go. So that's a habit. You don't have to think about it so much. You don't have to pay attention while you tie your shoelaces. You can have a conversation with somebody because the shoelaces are already a habit. Habit. I love this. When I was writing my book, that was scary. Speaking and singing on stages of thousands of people wasn't so scary. Writing my book was scary. And I'd all of a sudden realized at some point in the day that I had gotten up away from my computer and I was doing something else in my house. I had a habit of walking away from this project that I was scared to do. So there's habits that are also not helpful. You all of a sudden realize like you have a habit of going to the fridge and grabbing a snack late at night. To catch yourself, habit of biting the nails. You don't think about it. At some point you might realize, oh my God, I'm doing this. I should stop. I want my nails to look good. the conscious is where you look forward. And this is the conscious mind. These are the thoughts that you're very clearly aware of. But it's more of also that logical side. And it's the ability to read the carton on the milk when you're buying the milk, or whatever product you're buying from the grocery store, and reading the label so you can decide, is this something I can eat or not, something that I want. And when you're doing a new drive, so not the drive you always do, when you're doing a new drive, it's the ability to you pay more attention, right? You're looking at the lights, you're listening to your GPS talking at you, you're looking around for the different signs and which lane do I need to be in. That's the conscious mind helping you do that. Super conscious is when you're looking up. And this is when you're tapping into intuition. So the scientists have found that the prefrontal lobe is stimulated when people are using intuition. So I think there's a reason why yogis are looking up, is we're actually tapping into intuition as well. In a sense, you also feel more joyful when you look up. So easy ways to shift habits. Because think about it, when you're tired and sad, what's your body position? Right? Down. When you're happy and excited, up. So very easy ways to just shift those subconscious habits is look up more. If you want to fall asleep at night, you look down. If you want to lay in shavasana, the relaxation at the end of yoga, and not fall asleep, you look up. So that'll help shift the energy. Another fun way to shift habit, and this is how do you work with yourself and do something that you can do. And if anyone's listening to the 4-Hour Work Week or read the book, so I got this idea from there. Because he said, go out in the middle of the day and lay down in public, like in an area where you wouldn't normally. Now, in our culture, in the United States, that's a very odd thing to do. There are cultures where I've seen lots of people like sort of laying, on the sidewalk, not in the middle of the street because you don't want to get run over by a car, but laying down outside. We don't generally do that in our culture. But the idea is to do things differently than you normally do. If you normally drive to work in the right lane, drive in the left lane. So that brings you more into that conscious state of mind and out of habit, but it retrains the habit. If you normally put your trash can under the right side of the sink, put it under the left side of the sink. And I will tell you the laying down thing. I mean, you could find really neat ways to do this. I had mentioned this idea, and I hadn't done it yet, but I'd mentioned this idea to this 10-year-old girl. There's a group of us on a trip together. So it was, her mom and her daughter. And we were in the aquarium. And there was a moving walk through one of these sort of tunnels where the fish are over you. She turns to me, she says, "Hey, let's do the laying down right here." So we laid down on the moving walk, which is slightly awkward, but we got to look up at the fish. It was so beautiful. So there are fun ways to create the shifts in our habits.
Yeah, I mean, it's so fascinating at how we can help ourselves, and out of curiosity, are you more pleasure driven or pain driven? Are you more motivated to change, or are you more motivated by what's possible?
That's a good question. Because I've naturally been pleasure motivated. I started, like I said, I had a natural drive when I was a kid. I'm definitely motivated by pain. But more of the time, there hasn't been pain. So more of the time, if you take the percentage of time, right? So I mean, more of the time, I believe I have to be pleasure motivated because I'm not always in pain or aware of pain. I had a natural drive. Would you imagine an 8-year-old? My brother, he was a teen when I was about 8. And we had a little home gym in our basement. So I went to my brother and I said, "Would you create a workout routine for me?" Would you imagine I started lifting weights at age 8? I was a gymnast. I was already naturally inclined, and then I'm reading these health books and my mom's like, are you anorexic? Because I wouldn't eat dessert, but I had these huge meals. I was not anorexic. I'm a big eater. That's fire. Fire people are big eaters. Um, but so I didn't have any, physical issues in my body at that point to drive me to study health. But here's another thing. And when I was thinking about what is really making like fire and passion, for me, because I went through this thing this winter where I really wasn't excited about anything. And I'm going, well, I'm still alive. I want to live fully. Like, what's going to excite me? and it was, so I'm just sitting there waiting like for something to excite me. And then all of a sudden, we didn't have baseball last year because of the COVID. And so this year it's happening. And all of a sudden I'm finding out before the opening game happens. And I had never been to an opening baseball game. And I'm like, oh, that sounds really exciting. Like I was so excited. And you get online and you have to wait in this queue for like 3 hours to get your tickets. And that was exciting. And I'm like, okay, I found something like exciting. And it kind of, went from there. And then I got tickets for the All-Star game because they moved it to Denver, Colorado, where I live. And I'm like, wow, like I'm going to see the best baseball players in the, in the country, like in US and Canada, be playing right here in my home city. And then I got, was it a friend of mine was doing a fundraising event at the Broadmoor. The Broadmoor was like one of the nicest resorts in Colorado. And she can get us a discount to stay there overnight. It's when there isn't traffic an hour from where I live, when there is traffic 2 to 3 hours away. So it's a little bit of a distance. So it's nice to stay there overnight anyways for this event. And I'm like, oh my God, like I'm staying in the nicest resort, like in Colorado. And I decided it's like my favorite resort in the world at the Broadmoor. And what I realized is that I have to live fully. And living fully for me right now, because I've already done and experienced so much. So this entire year, it's just constantly like, what's new or what's a step up from what I've experienced in the past. Taking ballet on Zoom and taking it from the teachers who I'd always taken from, and it's the same routines every time. Like I was getting bored. I was like, I bet all the other studios that I've gone to in the past are also on Zoom because of the pandemic, right? Everyone moved it. And I'm like, my favorite thing is to take ballet in New York City. Like I bet the New York City, studios. And then there's so many teachers, and the teachers are from all over the world. And then I started taking other classes besides ballet. And for me, that's living life fully. I remember I went on a date with this gentleman because I've always been adventurous. And so he's hearing about all these adventures. And he's like, for me, adventure is just getting in my car and driving to work. And so I want to say, I was trying to have that kind of life. You could say I don't have to drive to work. I only have to walk across my home. But I was like, that's not adventure for me. That's not the life for me. So we really have to understand, well, a lot of other people are doing that. And the pandemic kind of caused that, right? For a lot of us, and staying home. But I had to get creative of how am I going to make life interesting and fascinating for me? There's so many things that people created during that time, and so many new technologies and new things that came out because a lot of people chose to live fully during that time.
Do you believe in fate, or do you believe in free will?
Both. Okay. If we get to, I believe that there is a form outside of the body and some sense of consciousness and awareness before we become humans. I also believe there's something beyond that where we're just all connected and then we don't necessarily have that understanding. It's a little weird to imagine how does that split apart and become conscious, and how do we get back together? So that's still, beyond my ability to understand how we disconnect and reconnect. But we make a choice before we're going to be born. What experience do we want this time? because being human and experiencing life through the five senses is very different than when you're outside of a body. And in a way, it helps you understand God more deeply, the divine spirit, whatever is all that connects us all. So we decide, okay, well, like I want to go in and I want to experience, love in the deepest way possible. And part of the process to get there is having a lot of not that, because then we understand what it is better and we appreciate it more when it comes. So you're kind of in this life and you have this drive, like to experience love. You might have a drive like, I want to have a successful business. I want to be a public speaker, right? I want to be rich, right? Anything is welcome to be your drive. And you're just going to feel a natural passion to this. And then you have these relationships that show up, that you feel very connected with somebody, but it doesn't also feel good. It's not going so well. Some might call them wound mates, not soulmates. I believe they are actually soulmates, but you chose to be wound mates in order to help each other have the experience that you wanted. So I remember with one of these people who's probably a wound mate, I was like, okay, I got the message. Like, we're done now. Can we just go and be friends now? Can we skip being wound mates now? And we're friends today. It took a few years until we reconnected. But that's where sort of more of the choice, comes in, where it's not necessarily the fate. So I truly believe that at any moment we could change our mind about the decision we made when we were born about what we want to live for. And in that way, we have complete free will. My yoga guru, Paramahansa Yogananda, for those of you who read or heard of Autobiography of a Yogi, millions of people have read this book. So it's a spiritual classic. He's the author of that. He's the first guru from India to settle in the West. And his astrology chart said that, and in a way, astrology is like a fate, because it's how the stars are aligned the moment you're born is the description of who you are. It's kind of the belief in astrology. And if you have a good astrologer, they're going to tell you how to work with who you are. But when you go beyond that, you can do what Yogananda did when it said he was supposed to get married 3 times. And he ripped up the chart and threw it in the fire. He never got married. He was fully happy his entire life. So I truly believe that there's a certain amount of free will to change that fate. And at any time, we can also stay within the decision we made in coming here and be really clear what we want in order to feel like life is truly fulfilled.
Are you at that stage of knowing or acting in a way of who you truly are?
Can I say that I ever know? I can say that I think I know, and all these things that I think I know make my body feel more relaxed. I feel more energetic. I feel more confident. Things fall in place better, right? So those are a lot of good signs, I feel, that can say that you know. But this winter also, and even this fall, when you attend a lot of personal development trainings and programs, you're constantly asked that question, like, what are your goals? What do you want to accomplish in the next year, 5 years, 10 years? What would you do if you died in 40 days? And so in some ways it continues to evolve and to break down to what am I intuitively drawn to, and what pieces are falling together, like doing this podcast. I think I'm doing about 7 podcast interviews this week. That's a good amount. And then what else is my heart compelled to experience? And I can say this personally because I've barely been in long-term relationship, and relationship that feels like it's harmonious over long-term, romantic, tons of friends, right? Family, all that's great. And I'm like, wow, that's an experience I haven't had yet. I would love to have that experience. Like I can feel my heart pull towards wanting to have that experience. And do I know that that's something I need? Because maybe at some point, once I go through enough growth, I stop craving it.
If
Maybe the
everything's
process is just,
sorry, go on.
oh yeah, but it's like that heart pull creates a drive in a certain direction. And then we learn what we need to along the way towards it. Does it mean that we're going to accomplish that goal, or we just needed to learn what we learned along the way?
Is that along the lines of everything's for you, not to you?
Yeah, for sure.
What's your calling? Do you know?
On the forefront right now, it is to help uplift other people and have tons of fun. On the deeper level, it's to do what I feel God is telling me to do. And what is that? It's my intuition. It's the drive, it's the heart pull, and to take action in that. Because I always had this vision of myself as this old woman sitting in the woods by myself the last few years of my life. And so the thing of uplifting people, and maybe that in a way does uplift people, but it's not like on stage and in people's faces, right? Because a lot of people believe like people who are meditating up in the Himalayas are doing that for the whole world. So I could still be uplifting people, but in a very different way. And so the temporary thing is uplift people and have fun. The later thing might be go sit in the woods and meditate. And, you don't even need to have any intention, just meditate.
It's quite, I mean, I'm going further. I mean, do you know what you're capable of? Do you have a sense of that?
I know what I'm capable of. No, because what I've been doing is I train my nervous system to be capable of more. Okay, so when you keep going to these trainings and you get asked your goal, and it's like, okay, I want to speak in front of 500 people. Okay, and then the next time you make it bigger. I want to speak in front of 1,000, and then the next time you make it bigger because I don't know, I don't want to do the same goal every time. So I made it 5,000 and then 10,000, and I'm sitting in a meeting with a coach. He's like, oh yeah, I spoke for 10,000 last week and 15,000 the other week. And then I'm like, oh, well, I don't want to do what's been done. Like, that seems like then you're just sort of following the course of what's been done. I made the number 100,000. And I looked like how many actual physical places in the world can 100,000 people fit? So I found a few of them. There's an arena, really beautiful, in Melbourne, Australia, that seats, normally 100,000. So there's probably about like 5 in the world that seat 100,000. Now you could always take a lot of stadiums, with the sports stadium in the field, put chairs there, and then get up to that number. If their number of normal seats are close to 100,000, or maybe there's just some giant field somewhere, where 100,000 people can be. But I don't need to do that. But I'm just like, let me put that down, because that sounds new. That sounds like a forefront that nobody, not many people have conquered, right? And I don't want to just be like at some sports game and, I get to pick, which hat is the ball under. Like, I want to be giving a motivational talk. But am I capable of that? Like, do I have something that's inspiring enough to that many people? I don't know. Am I capable of getting to that moment? I don't know. But I do know that I keep seeing more and more people motivated by me. They keep telling me, I keep getting new opportunities. That's what I know I'm capable of at this point, is what I'm doing. And it makes me nervous, to think of more. But at the same time, that makes life worth living.
And to that end, I mean, are you where you're supposed to be now? Do you think? I mean, in this process or this journey, if you want?
I always believe we're where we're supposed to be. I remember I was sitting in a channeling session with one of my spiritual advisors, and she's like, "You're not quite where you're supposed to be." And then she's like, "No, wait a minute. Oh, yeah, you're doing fine. You're doing fine. You're right where you're supposed to be." It's like, how are you supposed to know? But she's like, there's a seat waiting for you at this table. and for everyone, the stage is already set. And it's sort of like the stage is just waiting for us to walk on it. But I truly believe everyone is doing the best they can at any moment. This sounds a little complicated because it's maybe at another moment you did what people conceive as better, and then this moment you're not doing that. But there's a reason. There's a reason you didn't do that in this moment. Like maybe you didn't sleep enough the night before, so you were doing the best you could in this moment.
Because we choose everything, right? Good and bad.
Mm-hmm.
And it's being aware of that. That's the thing that many people sort of say, "Oh, bad things happen to me." It's like, no, well, if you can accept that you chose that, right? Because that is a choice.
Yeah. I should say this, really funny. Because I do all this growth work, like with relationships, and you think, okay, so naturally I'm just going to get better and better men. And a lot of them are like better matched, right, to what I want. And then I've also dated some guys recently who are like the worst. I'm like, well, am I supposed to think I'm going backwards rather than forwards because these guys came into my life? But what if they actually came in because I needed a bigger test? I was ready for a bigger test. And so I'm actually progressing. So it's actually good. Perspective.
It's that beautiful statement saying sometimes good doesn't happen so that great can, right?
Ooh, I like that. That was a good statement.
So when you're sort of out on a date with a crazy guy, it's like, yeah, there you go. Thank you for being a part of my process.
I know. Well, and I got to watch myself handle that better than I've handled easier situations in the past. It's like, oh, I was successful at it. If acting this way was my goal, I was successful.
Are you clear on your identity?
Am I clear on my identity? Yeah. There's a lot of diversity to my identity. So that's where sometimes it's a little slow, because on the exterior, sometimes it can be hard to figure me out. And of course, I'm going to pick and choose, how much I reveal when, where, but always the same person.
Do you talk to yourself?
Yes. And I look at myself in the mirror.
And do you get on with yourself?
I've spent a lot of time alone. I have learned to entertain myself. But one of the identity things, I used to think I was introverted. Really, what I was I didn't have the confidence and the skills to be as outgoing as I am. And there's an amount of healing that I've had to go through to be around people more. And everyone has this, but it's sort of like an amount of energetic sensitivity. And then also an amount of judgment that we hold. So there's a lot of things like people will say they're in a toxic environment. That's perspective. And that's also more about our ability to handle what shows up. rather than what somebody else is dishing out. So it's kind of like taking that example, because all of us have things we're working on. Like all of us have pains inside. And I'm just so sensitive to feeling everything. And so I've had to clean a lot of the pains inside me, a lot of my inner reactions and my judgment, to make it easier to be around people even more. It used to be like I needed so much time alone to recover from group things. And now I'm social almost every day. And I'm not like having that craving, like, oh, I need that time to myself, like not like it used to be. And so in some ways you could say our identity is changing, but it's more like a beautiful painted glass window with dirt on it, and you're just wiping the dirt off. The painted glass window has always been there inside of you.
For you, and in that, have you come in this life? Have you come with a cache? Have you come with maybe sort of unsolved things into this lifetime? Have you, is there a memory? Let's just say, is there a cache of information that's come with you that has to be solved as well as performing in this lifetime?
I have a unique belief around that. Because at one layer, there's also like the belief of karma and reincarnation. And in that circuit, you come in with stuff from the past lives. There's a belief that if you come in as like an avatar, true avatar, then you don't come in with any of that. And it's possible also that you don't come in with anything, but you have to come in somewhere. So there's going to be challenges around you, and you pick them up once you're here. But I do believe, in a certain sense, this belief of karma and reincarnation lives inside a certain bubble. So there's also a space around that bubble where you're not caught up in that circuit. And so when you come into being in a human, you actually choose, which one of these karma and reincarnation stories do I want to step into? And then you step into that and you take on that identity when you come into the human form. So it's that identity or the stories of things, with my family that I've stepped into, and that I carry, right? And it's that whole storyline, and it's lifetimes, and supposedly the storyline of karma and reincarnation that I'm living pretty much goes back to when Earth began, which means I have been a human for many, many of these lifetimes, which means there's many, many things where I've grown and learned, and there's many, many things where I've carried, things to heal. And I remember this one very intuitive young gal at the yoga community I used to live at. She stared at me one day and she goes, "You're like healing like almost everything in this lifetime. Like there's so many different areas that I've worked on, but there's a gift to that, because how many more people can I help by having gone through, almost every challenge out there?" When I first was diagnosed with a Hashimoto's and hypothyroidism, I was the fitness director at a YMCA in Montecito, California. So you may have heard, it's one of the most beautiful places. It tends to be older, wealthier adults. So at the YMCA, I'm working with a lot of older adults. And one of them approached me one day shortly after I was diagnosed, and I wasn't public about it, so people didn't know. And she says, "I have these thyroid issues, like you probably wouldn't understand." She sort of keeps going on. And I was like, oh, I got this at a young age, so I could understand these other people. That was the first thought that came into my head after she said that. So, who knows if even stepping into the package of this storyline with all of these traumas for me to overcome was also part of the package of being somebody who could help uplift a lot of people by personally going through all of those experiences, rather than just automatically knowing, but it not having the same, ability to have the compassion and empathy, right, from not having gone through it.
I mean, it's a beautiful way of looking at it, I suppose. It's that ability to, well, it's reflecting in oneself, isn't it, really? And it's sort of living all the experiences and being able to see everything that's going on around you, fulfilling your potential. I don't want to start throwing sort of, it's just a curious evolution. I mean, do people get you in general?
God, in general, if you look at the mass population, no. If you look at, I think there's different levels that people get me. I mean, I'm around a lot of people, right? And so I think there's different levels that people get me. And I test people every now and then to see what are they getting. A friend of mine wants to become a photographer of people eloping. And she asked me to model in a wedding dress for a photo shoot. And I don't have a partner, I don't have somebody that I could fake it with. So the passion of eloping. And she had me just do it solo. It's like, that was going to satisfy. Because even when you have a bride and groom together, you still do some solo pictures of each. I'm like, okay. And I didn't tell anyone I was doing the photo shoot. And I mean, people see photos of me with certain guys. I have some close guy friends, and I don't categorize on Facebook, right? This is my friend. This is the guy I'm dating. This was our first date. Like, I don't, I don't categorize all these things. Nobody necessarily really knows, what my relationship might be. But the people in my life, they know I'm not dating anyone right now. And I posted the wedding photo and I just said, look what happened tonight. So at first I thought of saying, I got married. Then I was like, no, leave it open to interpretation. Because of course, naturally, if you see a white dress, you assume there was a wedding. And so you look at, I think there were about, in the story, there were about 500 people who looked at it. And then, but on the post, there were about 300 people who liked it and like 100 comments. 90% of them were congratulations. 10% were, did you get married? And the people who I'm closer with, I replied, what do you think? The people I'm not close with, I didn't put them in that position. But every single one of the people who I'm close with said, no, you didn't get married. You just had a photo shoot. Yeah. You'll see it right away. My sister, when she posted on there, she knew right away what it was.
That or else she would no longer have been your sister because she would have left. It's like, you got married without telling me?
You got married without telling me. Like, who in the world were you dating? Like, we just talked last week and you were single. Like, my dad just visited, you didn't meet anyone. Yeah.
What was the original plan? What were you going to do? What was the mini version of you going to do when you grew up?
I had many ideas, because when I start getting passionate about something, I kind of want it to be my career. What I realized today is slowly a lot of those things that I felt most passionate about when I was young are pieces of my career. There is a part of me that knew from when I was a young age that I was not going to follow the usual pattern of get married, have kids, live in a suburban life, work a 9-to-5 job. I knew I was going to be an author. And it was more clear when I started having health issues, in my young 20s, that I was meant to help inspire and uplift a lot of people. And I didn't know exactly how. But I think I was just driven at a young age to take space. And this is also why I was more introverted, because I wasn't feeling aligned with everything going on around me at a young age. So I took a lot of space, and I think intuitively, so I could maintain some of my own understanding and identity. And then when I got old enough, I started studying, and exploring different things. And so I think there was a drive and a reason for all that. My favorite class, I went to a Jewish day school, and for kindergarten through 8th grade, my favorite class that you don't get to do till 7th grade was rabbinics. And rabbinics is the interpretation, the rabbi's interpretations of all the things written in the Bible. What does that mean? That's your morals. That's how you live. Like, that's the thing I've been most passionate about. How do we live in the best way possible? How do we be good people in this world? So some of those passions were there. And here's a fun one, and why I say I'm seeing it come full circle. I loved Barbie. I loved fashion. That's why I loved Barbie. I love Barbie's outfit. I love the big skirt that could come off, and then you've got your, your other little nightclubby outfit underneath that. And I kind of dreamed a little bit to have Barbie outfits when I grew up. And in some ways I've been just always intrigued by fashion and sort of what am I putting together, to put on my body every day. And so I paid a lot of attention to like what jewelry I put on with this outfit and what colors I was connecting. So that's a simple ways I've always lived fashion, and I'm in the public eye. So it's helpful for people, right? It's more enjoyable for people if I'm paying attention to fashion, in that way. But I've recently fallen into the fashion industry. I have a friend who's a model, and she puts on fashion shows, and she was going to do a retreat also on helping people with their self-identity. And I'm like, well, I'll support that. This was during the time where I was like, kind of bored. And so I'm like, I should go do some community service or something, so I knew her event was coming up. And so I just wrote to her, I'm like, do you want some help? I'm just, trying to fit more into do. And there still wasn't tons to do yet, right? As we're sort of coming out of COVID times. It's like, yeah. And so I was just going to dress models. And this was shortly after I had the concussion. So I didn't even want to be there for the show and the noise and the crowds. And so I thought that would give me a headache. A few minutes before the show starts, they're like, we don't have an MC. And my friend goes, well, my friend's a speaker. So, I MC'd on the spot, and they loved it. And the guy who was putting on the event, his name is Richard Kalisher. He runs a New Fashion magazine. And we start talking. He was so thankful. And he gets inspired by what I'm doing in my life. And I've emceed another fashion show that my friend was coordinating. And then he put me on the cover of his fashion magazine and put an article of mine inside the magazine. And this is where, things build and they combine together. But part of the sense of upliftment and having fun is I've started creating programs for these people who love doing things that are uplifting and that are fun. So we could be friends together and have fun together. And the last 2 years, the Valentine's event that I've put on has been my favorite. Last year, we did a date auction for charity. So now it's become a charity event. And so I'm like, okay, I want to do the Valentine's event, but make it bigger and better for next year. And the last 2 years were very different because of COVID. So I'm like, all right, this year, I think we could combine the two things that happened last year, and we're adding a fashion show. And then all of a sudden I'm talking with a new girlfriend, and her brother is a fashion designer from New York. And she's like, we're going to design your outfit for this event. I'm like, okay, can we make it like Barbie, where I have the big gown skirt and then I just take it off, and then I have my salsa outfit so I can perform salsa. So now we're combining like motivation, charity work, bringing people together in community and fun and fashion and dance, like all of these things in one event. And all of sort of my engineering skills and my organization skills and my leadership skills are being put together to help coordinate this event.
Yeah. So that that's your thing though, isn't it? It's that sort of bringing together, it's that connecting, it seems.
Mm-hmm.
That connecting with others.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's your earliest conscious memory?
Earliest memory is in the crib. I was a baby. And I always paid a lot of attention to my mother's footsteps in the house. Because when I was older, they were the footsteps that were about to come up at me and yell at me for still being awake. But when I couldn't fall asleep, I'd hide a book underneath the covers. But when I was a baby, it was mom's about to bring me some milk. And I remember getting, like you're allowed when you're a little one to get that excited, to put the breath and to jump and all that. When we get older, we're sort of taught we're not allowed to be that jumpy and loud about it. But I remember, standing in the crib, hearing my mother's footsteps coming up the stairs, knowing she was going to bring me milk and getting into that excitement.
Beautiful. I mean, what a lovely sort of first conscious memory to have.
Mm-hmm.
That connection and what's going on, really.
Mm-hmm. Here's something interesting. Have you heard this when you ask about somebody's earliest memory and like what it means? Because some people say that is about your purpose in life. Like our memory tunes into certain things. Like we create certain interpretations of situations because that's what we need to work on in life. That's what our purpose is. And so, relate that earliest memory to the purpose of my life. It's my mother's bringing milk. She's bringing nourishment. You're asking earlier about my name, Avital. It's Hebrew. It means dew, D-E-W, of my father. The spiritual meaning of that is sustainer of God. Dew in Kabbalah is divine nourishment in a hidden manner. My intention is to bring that nourishment, that excitement, that connection, that energy, that joy to people.
Nourisher. A human nourisher or a soul nourisher?
Soul nourisher. I like that. Yeah.
I'm just curious because you talked about dating there and you talked about having a partner in your life. And does that almost not go against that? I'm just wondering, does it not go with the, what we've talked about previously, is that actually it's not meant to be? Because if it was, it would be. So actually it's not meant to be, or it hasn't been decided at this time.
Okay. It's not meant to be yet. It could be meant to be in 5 minutes.
Sure.
Yeah, because I was like, it hasn't happened yet, so it's not meant to be yet. There's a number of signs that have said that is meant to happen. I mean, besides me having a vision myself, my astrologer said, that's going to come later in life, like in my 40s or 50s. Like a lot of things will come together later in my life. I've spent a lot of my life up till now learning and growing. I mean, in truth, that has been the highest focus of my life up till now. I've accomplished a lot, but I've spent a lot of time on the inner work, and all of that is going to feed into everything, that I do in the future, that I've already done that. And it's like every time you've already done a lot of that work, and I mentioned for the next year, like I'm doing a lot for my health too, because it's like, then you're rolling even faster and better. um I've had psychics who've said, yeah, I mean, it's coming later, like not yet. And there's certain things that need to fall into place for you also in order for that piece to show up. And then there's this numerology, and then there's this gal who reads like your playing cards, literally. And part of my design, it's a two. Two is all about connection and relationship and partnership with one other, right? It's two coming together. And that's also why, in my heart, I feel so much the desire. And a lot of times when I'm connecting with people, I'm doing one-on-one events. I do a few group events, but I'm doing a lot of one-to-one. And so I'm, meant, you could say, by my design to be connecting deeply with one other person. With having that two come together. So I'd like to think it's meant. And, and who knows if it just stays as all these friends that I'm close with. But, I'd like to think sort of all of this, how do I say, there's, if we talk too about having different experiences in life and having a lot of diversity, so that I can relate to even more people. So having a partner and having that personal experience also gives me the opportunity to relate to people in romantic partnership and learn more ways that I can support them. I already do a lot for them, but how much more could I do once I have that experience?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Thanks. Who knows? That's the
Mhm.
beautiful part of it,
Yeah.
What's the nicest thing somebody could say about you?
The nicest? I'll say the thing that's coming to my mind first. That's the easiest way to answer this question rather than rolling through all the possible things and categorizing. Um, and I would say that it's that I naturally have love in my heart. So those are the words that are coming to me right now.
That's beautiful. Very simple.
Mhm.
Hmm. What
Mhm.
tell us, talk to me about your book. What was your intention, and really what's its purpose?
Yeah. Healing happens, stories of healing against all odds. I've actually been in a couple other books, and there's more to come. But if you ask about my book, that's the book, I put together fully, and my first book. And so I mentioned about having the health issues. And then I just start, when you're going to go buy, like a blue Honda CRV, you start seeing blue Honda CRVs everywhere. So I'm healing beyond what's expected as my mind is tuned into that. So it's like everywhere I go, I'm meeting somebody who was told they're going to die in a few months or a few hours, but they were told that years before that. Like, oh, there's this many stories. Like, people need to know, how frequently things can turn around from what we expect. And let's put them all in one book because it's more believable. Right? Some of them have individual books, but it's so easy if it's just one story to brush it off as some fluke or some other reason that we can't identify. The more we put more of those stories together and find out what's in common, right? The easier you could say it's like scientific research. What's repeatable? It becomes more believable, relatable, and understandable. So that's part of it. And the other part was because they're all different types of healing paths. And somebody will go to an allopathic doctor and that won't work for them. So they'll go to an acupuncturist and that works. Somebody else will go to that acupuncturist and that won't work. And they'll go to the allopathic doctor and that will work. But what was the same about when each of them had the success? So it's a general understanding of how to go about the healing path, no matter which path you're on.
That's fabulous. And it's that coming together, I suppose. And what similarities did you see there? Were there similarities? Were there
Yes.
common elements?
Yes. And that's what I call my full body success mastery. I'm going to take a sip of water before I tell you what that is. Full body success mastery. Number one, reason to live. So when I give talks, I have people do physical motions because it's going to keep you more activated, stimulated, and help you understand better. So the motion with this one is you put your hands on your heart and then you reach your arms forward and open. I've got a microphone in the way, so otherwise my arms would, and like 10 drinks on the table, otherwise my arms would open a lot more, because there's this vast potential of what those reasons to live could be, right? You've been hearing a lot of my reasons to live and my passions, right? And it can be, though, it's like, I want to see my kid walk down the aisle. I want to be able to play with my grandkids. This is one of my favorite stories. She wanted to finish watching the soap opera series. She was given a few months. She called the TV station. How long is the soap opera series going? It's going for the next 5 years. She put all her money into the TV series to be able to see that, and stayed alive for those 5 years. Watched the whole soap opera series. So the vast, wide open potential of what it could be. This gentleman, this is Dr. Bernie Siegel telling the story, who wrote Love, Medicine, and Miracles. And he's really the person that I coined this concept from, because he kept seeing over and over again these terminal cancer patients, and the ones who would survive that were the ones who were focused on their reason to live. And so this one gentleman is a landscaper, and he has to go have surgery for his cancer. He's going to die. But he tells Dr. Bernie, no, like, it's springtime. Like, I have to go make the world beautiful. Like, I would rather die, like I need to go make the world beautiful. I need to do my passion to live. So then he goes back a few months later and he says, okay, we can do the surgery now. So they do the surgery, and he says, I'm sorry, but it's still there. We need to do another surgery. And he says, no, I can't. Like, there's still, more good weather. I need to go do more landscaping. He shows up a few years later, and his assistant or his nurse is saying, okay, John's coming in. And she said, no, like, that's the wrong chart. That guy is dead, right? Because he's thinking like he had, this was terminal. If he didn't get that surgery a few years ago, he would be dead. And the gal says, no, it is the same person. It's just story after story of that connection of living in our passion. That's what gives us life. And if nothing else, we are enjoying life in the process, by focusing on our reason to live. And this is great for entrepreneurs to keep in mind as well. But anytime you have a bright idea, vision, dream, you tell somebody. Have you also had experiences where they start telling you how hard it's going to be? That's impossible. Nobody's ever done it. You don't have the skills to do it, right? Here's going to be the challenges that are going to come up with that, instead of focusing on the possibility of it. So here's Maureen Bell. She's given 6 to 8 weeks to live with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, a type of cancer. As predicted, 6 to 8 weeks later, she's in bed, hospice care, 85 pounds, morphine patches, oxygen tubes, like unable to get up or, eat, just pain in her body. And she's getting ready to die. And her son comes in and says, to say goodbye. But he's like, why didn't you fight this? You were a strong single mom who raised me and believes in energy healing. Why didn't you fight? She's like, oh, do I have a choice? And that's what led her into what some people might call a near-death experience, where she had a shift in perspective, comes back from, wakes up from that experience like it was a beautiful dream or something. And for the first time, didn't feel pain and felt hungry. She had one more round of chemo scheduled. She decided to go through with it, but she finally researched what was in the chemo drug. Some of it was made from her favorite plant. So now she's going into it with a different relationship. So we talk about all these side effects from chemo. And for her, like, normally it would take 9 or 10 hours for all the drugs to get into her body. But this time, with a different relationship, it took 3. Normally her urine would turn blood red. This time it stayed its normal color. So what we say, number 2, is don't listen to everything. Don't listen to everything. Because the side effects from a different perspective are not necessarily the same. There's another story in my book with Sam Shelley that people can check out also to see, where there was a shift in that, but then also given 6 to 8 weeks to live. What I would prefer, doctors say is that normally somebody in your condition we see living 6 to 8 weeks to live, versus you have 6 to 8 weeks to live, right? Different statement opens possibility. It makes people aware of risk and opens possibility. And then I'll say, briefly, if you want number 3 and 4, because we're also getting close to our time. So do what you can do. And I've talked quite a bit about this, the concept of doing what you can do and how, if you can't change your diet, meditate. If you can't change your emotions, change your diet. Doing what inspires you, doing what you're capable of. This one woman, it was a lover, was a Kale. She was getting married fairly quickly. And she had lupus. She was a doctor, and she knows that lupus doesn't get healed. She wants to look great for her wedding. Her husband helps people lose weight quickly. Well, fiance at the time, right? So he puts her on his diet. It happens to be a vegan diet with the way that they put it together for her, especially. And all of a sudden, there's no lupus. What does she do? Vanity. She wanted to look good for her wedding. Number 4, we've talked about this also. It's ask, or I like to say sing, the question, what is the gift? What is the gift? And there's people who, they've changed cities they lived in. They've got out of terrible relationships. They've changed careers. And then all of a sudden, their health issue goes away. There was a gift. All of these practitioners who I interviewed became what they're doing specifically with their practice because of their health issue. There was a gift that they got that they're able to gift to other people also.
It's all about finding your gift, isn't it? And then being of service.
Mm-hmm.
It's huge.
Yep. Yeah.
I am conscious of time and aware you have other commitments here. So tell me, if you were to try and describe your fire in the belly in 1 or 2 words, what would they be?
Passion and willpower.
What a combination.
Mm-hmm. Willingness is one of the key words I talk about in raising people's energy too. Is it okay if I give your listeners a gift?
Please, I'll be honored.
Okay. We've talked a bit about me being an Energizer bunny, then losing it, figuring out how to get that back. And I've created a very simple webinar that I would love to invite your listeners to, complimentary. I also talked about how I love figuring out, if you're on a deserted island and you don't have anything else, what could you do within your own self? But this is, you're driving to work one day. It's going to be a long day. You're not feeling energetic. What could I do to more quickly shift my energy? I don't even have time to drop by a store, or get a coffee. I don't even have time to go get a coffee. And so these are the tools that I teach. So I created a webinar that's called Energize Your Life, the 3 keys to unlock unlimited energy. And so you're going to get those 3 keys, and you simply go to unlockunlimitedenergy.com in order to sign up for the next webinar.
Wow, that's wonderful. That's very kind. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. We'll make sure and put that in the show notes so people can follow it, and so they'll be able to follow you. Where else do people go to follow you, hunt you down, track you, be of service, join you?
Awesome. I mentioned my book, Healing Happens. You can go to healinghappensbook.com, which will take you to the entire Healing Happens website with my online courses, the podcast, the blog, how to connect with me. And feel free to email me info@avitalmiller.com. Avital is spelled A, V for victory, I, T for talented, A-L, And you can follow me on Facebook. I've created a bunch of different pages and groups in there. So once we start, connecting on Facebook, you'll start learning some of these other pieces of inspiration that you can also follow. I am easy to find on Facebook because it's just my name, Avital Miller, and you'll recognize my face.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Your final message you'd like to leave with our listeners today?
Final message is sometimes there's nothing wrong with us except that we think something is wrong.
It's all right. It's all supposed to be, isn't it? That's beautiful. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Avital, thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate you. Listen, and I know it's going to be, there's a lot of amazing information and nuggets in there, and I'm sure a lot of people will be following you. So thank you. Thank you for your time. I appreciate you.
Thank you. This was an absolute pleasure, and I really, really appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you.